There was a moment where I had a panic attack on a conference call, and I think I knew in that moment that I was going to leave.
I was like jumping in this bounce house, and literally I was laughing hysterically and like with tears of joy. And I was like, why the hell am I laughing so hard?
With anything that in your gut to be true, it is going to come out. Something I'm learning the older I get is that I'm either going to, do it while I'm scared, tell the truth, move in the scary direction, or it's going to kind of burst out of me like vomit or like a zombie, clawing its way out of me. You know what I mean?
And sometimes it does come out like that. It comes out ugly. It comes out clawing. It comes out scrappy. It's not always beautiful and amazing.
I love writing in the vein of nostalgia because it's not this vapid, girly, silly thing. It's a reminder that shame is learned, right? We were not born hating our body. We weren't born questioning our worth as human beings. We weren't born at war with ourselves in all these different ways that we pick up. That's learned.
Welcome back to season 3 of the Do Tell Relationship Podcast. I'm so excited to be back. I'm your host, Nina Westbrook, and you are in for a real treat this season. I'm coming back. It's been quite some time, and I had a wonderful response from season 1 and season 2, and I kind of want to jump into catching you up to speed on all that has happened since we wrapped for season 2. First of all, I want to acknowledge our new studio, which is definitely curated and inspired by me and all the things that I love. And I'm really happy and comfortable here. I feel like we're going to have some really great and amazing conversations with all of you. Secondly, there has been so much that has happened and changed over the last, I don't know if it's been a year, but it feels like it's been a year. I'm changing the format this season. I'm going to have a special little co-host friend of the show periodically. Lots more guests, lots more episodes. We are now back every Tuesday, bi-weekly, which means I'm going to see you 2 times every month as opposed to 12 episodes in a season. You're going to be able to come listen all year round, which I'm very excited about. And we're just going to get to have more fun conversations, kind of touching base on all the things that are going on in the world, bringing you new perspectives from some really incredible, amazing guests. One of the other really cool things about this season moving forward is I'm going to start taking questions from you for both myself and our guests, depending on the topics. And if you want to hear your voice on an episode, use the fancy new little DM thing that is happening on Instagram to send us a DM to Benet by Nina on Instagram. And it's Benet X Nina on Instagram. And if you're old fashioned and like me, maybe you want to send an email, email your question in, and we'll get to answer it right here on the show. And I can't wait to hear of all the fun things you guys want us to talk about, because that's what I love to do. I love to chat. We're going to talk about dating. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about, friendship, parenting, working relationships, all things relationships. We have you covered, and we're going to be discussing them right here on Do Tell Relationship Podcast. We're actually starting off with a really cool guest today. Her name is Victoria Hutchins, and maybe you've seen her online at the Daily Victorian, which she's the founder of. Before stepping into the creative world, Victoria worked as an international lawyer, a path that shaped her perspective before she fully embraced her passion for storytelling. Her debut novel, Make Believe, explores the power of imagination and the stories we tell ourselves, and that space that exists between longing and transformation, which we all could use a little insight on. We're going to explore how childhood thinking shapes who we become and the expectations we carry, especially when it comes to love and relationships, and for those moments when we realize that we're holding on to a version of ourselves that no longer fits. One of the things that I'm most excited to talk to Victoria about today is this whole idea of wonder and like childlike fun, because I feel like there's so many times where I want to have fun, or we have these experiences almost that feel outer body, and we're in a moment of pure joy, and they don't come around very often as adults, right? We have so many responsibilities. We're taking care of our kids. We're trying to work and be, efficient and productive, which I feel like is one of the big things is productivity, and I don't know why I just said that. But I feel like we're starting to come to this space where we really want to embrace our mental health and wellness. We want to embrace what it means to not think that working all the time is a good thing. We want to embrace getting back to the ability to just have fun and let go and be free before we started to feel all the pressure from society and all the different anxieties and get self-conscious and have all of these things that make us or keep us away from that childlike feeling. And I feel like Victoria is going to be really good to help get us back to that centered place where we can embrace that sense of wonder and that childlike nostalgia that we get in those really joyful moments. So this is going to be really good. Are you ready to get into it? Let's go. Welcome. Thank you for joining. It's really, really nice to meet you. And I'm really excited for our audience and listeners to hear a lot more about your journey, because I'm all about tapping into our childhood nostalgia, and almost to the point where it's a little embarrassing sometimes when I like completely forget where I am for a minute and like go way into it. And I'm like laughing and crying and like tears of joy and just having this really wonderful moment. So anyhow, we'll get into that. But can you tell me, well, first of all, we're going to start with a little like icebreaker. I want to get to know you a little bit more outside of the work that you do, and get a little insight into how your brain works with this little segment called Walk Away or Walk Through It. It's kind of like a rapid fire, but you can give context or not give context. It's up to you. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited for the icebreaker. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So the first question is, you're in a deep writing zone, fully inspired, and a friend calls, needing an hour-long vent session. Walk away or walk through it?
I would answer the call.
Love
Walk
that.
through it.
Plain and simple. Your intuition tells you that a dream or goal no longer aligns with who you are, but part of you struggles to let it go. Walk away or walk through it?
If I'm showing up how I want to, I would walk away. I would walk away from what isn't aligned anymore. But that's so much easier said than done.
Yes, agreed. Okay. A person you really enjoy spending time with rarely reaches out first. You always have to be the first one to initiate plans. Walk away or walk through it?
Always is hard. I don't think you have to have a 50-50 dynamic with people that are in your life. But if they're never reaching out, that feels like maybe they don't enjoy you that much. So I might walk away in that case.
Okay, good. I fully agree on that. Because we all go through different times in our life where we might be a little busy, got a little extra thing going on, and we forget to take a step outside of what we have going on and check in on our friends. But as long as you always get back there and, you're able to take some moments together, but, it's not going to be 50-50, like you said.
That's right.
A close friend means well, but consistently gives you unsolicited advice. Walk away or walk through it.
I'd walk through it, but I might let them know when I'm venting, I'm not looking for advice necessarily. I'm looking to just feel heard.
Okay, good. That's really healthy communication. I would expect nothing less based on what I've read about your upcoming book. So that makes a lot of sense. And so I think let's jump into our conversation. You're here to talk about your new book, your debut book called Make Believe, which explores imagination and the way we create narratives in our minds. And I kind of want to get into you defining the moment that led you back from your career in international law, which is very different than what you've explained. You've kind of grown up in a family with creativity and film and music and writing. So tell us a little bit more about your journey from growing up that way to then practicing law and finding your way back eventually into writing and your creativity.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a fan. I'm so excited to talk with you. Yes, before I was a poet and an internet person, I was a corporate attorney. So, extremely different world. Hard to imagine more different careers. I did tax driven mergers and acquisitions work. So, just very technical corporate work, wild hours. There are a few moments that stick out to me as kind of inflection points. Like you said, I think there has always been a gut part of me that knew that I wanted to do something creative. That was present in my childhood. I felt that pull when I was in college. I went to college in New York. It's such a creative city. But I think that I was so afraid of failure that I just didn't feel, I wasn't willing to risk failure to try to do something creative. And I found myself in law school and in the practice of law, not because I ever thought I was passionate about that. I don't think I ever had any illusions about feeling passionate about the practice of corporate law, but I think it would be hard. Maybe there are. I think there are people, but that's not me. I think I sought out a job that was a sure thing. I thought I would be good at it, and there was always a next clear step. After college, go to law school. After law school, go to a law firm. And I think I liked that clarity because I didn't have the confidence to do something without clarity. So I think that there was that gut knowing. Then there were moments like maybe anyone listening, if you're in a job that doesn't feel aligned with you. Coming back from a vacation, as silly as it sounds, is so hard. Like any moment you get a little break, a little taste of like life not consumed by your job. That first day back, I had some moments that just like I felt it was so hard to come back after getting any little taste away. There was a moment in my last year at my law firm, which I did continue practicing law after I left my firm, but there was a moment where I had a panic attack on a conference call. And I think I knew in that moment that I was going to leave. And
Wow.
I didn't at the time, I think jumping from being a full-time attorney at a huge firm where you do nothing but work to being where I am now, that was unfathomable. But I knew something had to change. And it's been baby steps between there and here. And my life is still surprising me every day. As someone who, for the first part of my adult life, for all of my 20s, would have said I'm not a creative person, to be a poet is just silly and wild to me. It's wild. but I'm happy.
That's good. I feel like happiness is so important. And I think a lot of us kind of wrestle with, what are we doing with our lives versus what we should be doing versus what we're passionate about versus what is our calling. And it's always the I feel like the waters are always a bit murky when we're trying to get to that end destination. And then at the end of the day, like what is the end destination really? Because we're constantly going to be forced with having to make different decisions and like pivot and make, reinvent ourselves. And so I think that what you're saying is it will resonate with so many people because so many of us I started out college as an English major. And I quickly realized that this is not what I don't even have the capacity to like be in English. I did finish in English, but I knew immediately that I was going to finish this, but I was also going to do something else. And I shifted into psychology. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it's really cool to see people be able to step into that thing that even through all of the fear and gaining that confidence that you can now say, I'm an author and I'm an author of a book that is all about make believe. So you described yourself as someone who's always been drawn to nostalgia and storytelling. Looking back, how did the stories you told yourself as a child shape where you are today?
That's such an incredible question. And I think just going back to what you said about being an English major and realizing that that it wasn't going to work for you, I think that in itself is a really powerful step. Like, even when we don't feel ready to make a change, just that realization of like, I can't change my reality this moment, but I know that at some point I'm going to. I think that's big
Oh,
in itself. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Just
I never thought about it that way, but thank you. I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for
yeah.
recognizing that early on.
I think that's a big thing. Like, just acknowledging that that whisper is there is so
Mhm.
big. And
Mhm.
on your question of the stories I told myself as a child and how those affect me now or how they've shaped where I am, I think that kind of gets right to the heart of what make believe is about, because
Mhm.
make believe it uses nostalgia throughout the whole book. And I think that nostalgia is something that's really surging in culture right now, like
Mhm.
girlhood and even fashion,
Mhm.
Y2K style. That's nostalgic, at least for me and the age that I am. And I think like it's thought of as kind of this vapid thing sometimes, when really looking back at our childhood and
Mhm.
the stories that we told ourselves, or the way we saw ourselves, like going back with eyes that are different and eyes that hopefully are kinder, can we hold on to so much, you know? And
Right.
so I think that I always have been intensely perfectionist, to the
Mhm.
point where if I did not know that I could succeed at something, I would not even try. And so I think
Mm.
a lot of work that I do as an adult, like in therapy and just in my thought, is interrogating that, because that's still there. And then
Mhm.
I think most of us, over the course of our childhood and our adolescence, we pick up a lot of shame. And
Mhm.
I love writing in the vein of nostalgia, because it's not this vapid, girly, silly thing. It's a reminder that shame is learned, right? We
Mhm.
were not born hating our body. We
Mhm.
weren't born questioning our worth as human beings. We
Mhm.
weren't born like at war with ourselves in all these different ways that we pick up. That's learned.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I think I love writing about childhood because it's a reminder of that. And for me, like I had a good childhood, and I it makes me sad because in sharing my writing, I've learned so much from like, getting messages from thousands of women. And sadly, I think many people can't remember the time before they learned shame and self-hate.
You know, listening to you talk about how you kind of grew up and some of the stories you told yourself around perfectionism and shame raised this. I mentioned it earlier, but it raises this. I feel like we're very similar in a lot of ways already, but it raised this memory for me that I actually have as an adult, which was we got a bounce house. I got a bounce house for my kids for something. It was probably someone's birthday, and I was jumping in this bounce house, and this was not that long ago. Typically, I wouldn't do that because I'm old enough to where I get hurt very easily and I tire very easily. But I was like jumping in this bounce house and literally I was laughing hysterically and like with tears of joy. And I was like, why the hell am I laughing so hard? Like after I came to, like it was just a moment of, I think I felt like freedom in that moment and that childlike joy that you talk about in the book, which is something as a perfectionist growing up, is something I never really experienced. So maybe as a child, having those experiences, jumping in bounce houses, that feeling you get when you're on a swing, when you're just soaring. Like I would be one of those kids that's almost doing like a full 360 loop on a swing. And just the way your mind kind of just lets go in the moment and it takes you back to that time before you felt that shame and before you believed that you couldn't fly, and you weren't free. And it is such a beautiful feeling when you can tap into that. But for so many of us, we have a difficult time doing that, right? So is that something that we can learn from reading more in your book?
You know, it's so funny that you mention being in a swing and that feeling of jumping out of a swing, or that feeling when the chains catch, and you're floating for a moment. Because there's a poem in Make Believe that's about that, called The Swing of Things. And it's about how we forget how to let go, and, comparing it to that feeling of being able to just jump out of a swing, and for that one moment you're floating through the air. And so I think something that I write about in Make Believe and that I think about a lot is how every emotion is not just a feeling, but it's an action, right? And so in choosing to like live into our joy and making choices that are motivated by our joy, we can call
Wow.
back that feeling of childlike wonder and childlike joy. Those are feelings we were never meant to lose access to. Like, it's almost sad that we think of those as childlike emotions because they're meant to exist continuously throughout our life. And so, yes, I think that we have so much power over how we feel. And the title Make Believe is a reference to playing make believe as a child, but it's also a reference to the idea that we do have the ability to make ourselves believe things, to make ourselves feel things, right? In what we turn our attention to. And so one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, there's many people who write about this beautifully, Simone Weil as well, but the idea that our attention is an act of devotion, right? It's the highest act of devotion. And so I think that it's really hard, especially in what the world looks like today, to turn our attention towards things like hope and joy and wonder. And yet I think that's the only path forward, individually and societally.
Yeah. And I think that you're right on with that. And I feel like it takes me into my next question around sort of this this idea of creating the narrative in our own lives. And a lot of people like to refer to it as like being the main character in your own life. And that's become very popular. So, but when you're writing and in real life, that often means that you're making hard choices. So, how have you ever had to disappoint someone or shift courses or do anything that was really difficult in order to stay true to yourself? I know you talked about your transition from international law into tapping into your creative side, but is there any other examples of that you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm thinking. So I mean, of course, one example that probably comes to mind for everyone, definitely me, is ending relationships, like ending
Mm.
friendships, ending dating relationships. That's an extremely hard thing to do. There's often no way to do it without hurting someone that you care deeply
Mhm.
about. And yet, if you know that from your vantage point, you're not in it anymore, the only respectful thing to do for yourself and for the other person is to end it. So I think
Mhm.
that's a hard choice that we all have to make. And I think that in deciding what to do, often we ask other people for advice when we're at a threshold like that. Should I break up with them? Should I, whatever it is?
Mhm.
I think most of the time we know what we want to do, and it's kind of like we're seeking permission to do what we want to do, or
Mhm. Mhm.
what we know we want to do is scary, and so we're flushing it
Mhm.
out that way. So that's an example that comes to mind. I'm also bi. I came out of the closet in law school and in my career, in the start of my career when I was at the law firm. That was very, very hard, very confronting, hardest
Mhm.
chapter of my life for sure. Not just
Mhm.
because I was coming out, but I was just navigating a lot of hard stuff. But I
Mhm.
find that with anything that like in your gut to be true, whether it's that you're emotionally not in a relationship anymore, or you're not straight, or there's just like some burning truth inside you, it is going to come out. Like you
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
can't run from yourself forever. You can't run from your truth forever. And
Right.
so something I'm learning like the older I get is that I'm either going to, do it while I'm scared, tell the
Mhm.
truth, move in the scary direction, or it's going to kind of like burst out of me like vomit or like a zombie like clawing its way out of me. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
that's a really gross example to compare it to vomit, but like the truth
We
comes
get the
out.
point
You
though.
know what I
Yes.
mean? The truth is going to come
And
out. So,
sometimes it does come out like that. It comes
no.
out ugly, it comes out clawing, it comes out scrappy. It's not always beautiful and amazing, but so that I feel like that's the perfect analogy,
Mm,
honestly.
you get
I
it.
like
Yeah.
to kind of think about that even from the flip side in our relationships and how we can show up and be the main character in that if we choose who we want to be and we say this is how I want to show up in my relationships, this is the type of relationship that I want, and this is who I want to be, I'm giving main character energy, and this is the main character that I want to represent, and then choose the relationships with people based on who allows you to do you and live out that narrative, right? So kind of working backwards, which a lot of people always start from the other. And we start in a relationship and we go through these different changes in our lives and we decide what we want to do, and maybe we want to shift careers or whatever the case may be, and we're just hoping that the person that we're with is willing to come along the journey with us, rather than saying, here's what I want to do, here's who I am. Is this person going to fit into my journey and allow me to be the person I want to be?
Yes. And we do it in so many different ways. We do it in small ways and big ways. And I think it's something like in my 20s, I was 100% the girl that tried to be who I thought you would like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100%. And it's abandonment of yourself, number one. It also doesn't work. Like it will, who
Mhm.
you actually are will come out. They will find out your dirty little secrets, that your personality isn't what you are
Mhm.
putting it out to be. It's not even going to work. So there's that. But I think that's like such a common thing that we all do. And it's something that I still like. How many times will the universe have to teach me that I can't like cram myself in a box that I don't fit in forever? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
we have to learn that on a continuous loop in many different ways. But yes, the temptation to do that in relationships, especially I think like when you're still like really actively figuring yourself out, is
Mhm.
so real. And it really affects, I think it affects your ability to give love as well. Because
Mhm.
when the way you're seeking connection is all about kind of having something to prove to yourself, it
Mhm.
makes it where the criteria you're using to seek people out doesn't really have anything to do with them. You know what I mean? Because it's about, I'm seeking this person out because they make me feel like a question mark. They leave me scrambling, and that is triggering me. It doesn't have anything to
Mhm.
do with their personality. So you're
Mhm.
not really even liking them for them. Like it affects your ability to receive love, but also to give it, you know?
Right. And also the thing, like, we can't really give love and show up for people in their lives the way that they need if we can't even do that for ourselves a lot of the time. And that one thing that there's one thing that you touched that you just mentioned, and I feel is so important to note that when we don't get the opportunity to show up in relationships as our authentic self, we are exerting so much energy. Like, have you ever met someone who is just so authentically themselves that it costs them very little energy to just exist and be in relationships and in different rooms and scenarios because they don't have that like they're not presenting a version of themselves that they want other people to see them as or that they feel will please someone else. They get to just be normal and be themselves and be authentic, which takes very little energy. And I feel like for so many of us, we struggle with presenting ourselves in that space. A lot of the times it doesn't feel safe, or we have insecurities, or we're nervous about whatever the case may be. But I feel like the people who have the most joy and the people who have like who are so happy are the ones that get to authentically show up as themselves.
Totally. And it goes back to the nostalgia because think about
Mhm.
being a little kid and feeling comfortable
Mhm.
to like be in a grocery store and kick and scream or just run around making a bunch of noise, right? And
Mhm.
we lose
Mhm.
that as we get older. And I think about myself in my 20s. I would have told you 11 ways to Sunday that I was an introvert. I don't actually think I really am an introvert. I think I had bound myself up in so many different social norms and rules that socializing was really uncomfortable for me because it was like
Mhm.
a test in a million different ways that I needed to pass with a million different people. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because getting into my 30s, I feel like a little kid again in a lot of ways. My interests have returned. Like I'm creatively inclined again. I'm much more outgoing again. I was a super outgoing kid. And
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
peak of struggling in my 20s, I was a very, very quiet person in social settings because I just felt like I don't I don't know what I can say that's going to not rock anyone's boat. So let me just be quiet. And that's not to say that's the case for all introverts or that introversion is like born out of insecurity. I don't think that's the case for everyone at all. But I do
Mhm.
think that we often get ourselves so choked with all these
Mhm.
different rules that like we lose touch of how to enjoy being around other people because rather than being focused on connection, we're just focused on how we think we're being perceived by everyone in the room.
Yeah, and I can relate to the I can relate to you on that because I grew up thinking I was an introvert also. It honestly wasn't until recently where I learned Like, I would always say I'm an introvert, but around people that I really love, like, you can't get me to shut up. And I'm the life of the party. I'll start on the dance floor, end on the dance floor, but I have to be in a really safe environment. So then I started to question, like, does that really mean that I'm an introvert? And
Mhm.
it also, I think it goes back to, well, who are you with when you feel most authentic and you're
Mhm.
not having to exert so much energy or be protective or be polished or whatever the case may be, you know? And for me, when I'm in my little bubble in my safe space with my safe people, there is none of that. There is no fear of judgment. I can be rude, I can be snappy, I can make snarky comments, I can tease people and make fun and do all of these things that if I did in front of a different crowd, they would probably think I was the meanest, craziest person they've ever met, right? So I learned that I'm not an introvert. I think it's called an I was
Ambivert,
re-
right?
yeah, where it's
Yeah.
both, right?
I think so. Yeah,
It's
I think
really,
I'm that too.
yeah, it's very cool. And I think it's really interesting. It goes back to the stories we tell ourselves, right? And, even in our society, being an introvert is not something that's really like valued or praised, right? Everybody thinks that the coolest or the fun person in the room always gets the attention and we like that person more, right? Because they entertain us, they make us feel a certain way. So I feel like being considered an introvert got a bad rep for a long time, but now we are shifting away from that, like with stories like the one that you're sharing in your book about how to be okay and be confident in that authenticity and in that make believe and those, like, not, I know we don't want to call them childlike feelings and emotions, but really it does, that nostalgia takes us back to our childhood. Have you ever found, okay, so let's go into like the love and fantasy and the expectations that we carry. So you mentioned, you're growing up in the South. Did you feel like there were certain expectations around love and relationships that shaped how you saw your romantic life?
Yeah, I think so. My parents have been married for I don't know how many years, but they've been married, I mean, 30 plus years for sure. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, so I grew
Mhm.
up very religious, and I think that definitely shaped how I viewed relationships. And I think that
Mhm.
most of us as women, like in the South or anywhere, we
Mhm.
learn the roles we're meant to serve in relationships, especially in the South, especially if you were raised religious. And I think that definitely shaped my sense of relationships.
Mhm.
I'm quite a dominant personality in relationships, I
Mhm.
find. Like I'm kind of like the loud energy frequently in a lot of my friendships, and I think
Mhm.
that was something it took a long time for me to understand that that was okay and not like abnormal, because I think we do learn that, in big and small ways, if you're in a man woman relationship, the woman is meant to be, you know just the quieter energy. That's
Mhm.
definitely not my experience in almost any relationship I'm in.
Same. That's so funny. Um, okay, so I feel like, you know, there's so many different topics and there's so many different things that you touch on in your new book. Can you share what the biggest takeaway has been from the entire experience? Just recalling, because I feel like writing a book is often very therapeutic. So, like, what was that process like, and what was the biggest takeaway for you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, the biggest takeaway, Make Believe is being published with a spiritually focused imprint of Penguin Random House. And I
Mhm.
felt some resistance to that during the process of the proposal and figuring out where it would land, just
Mhm.
because I was raised very religious, and I walked away from that in my 20s. And I
Mhm.
think for a long time I was in a pretty nihilistic space, in a nothing matters space. I don't know if there's purpose in the universe space. And so I felt some resistance to, I was starting to explore spirituality again. I was starting to think about purpose and divinity and that sort of thing again. But writing this book has really helped me come back to
Mm.
an identity as a spiritual person, as a person
Oh,
who's a
wow.
believer. And so that's been a really, really special and personal journey for me that's still happening. And I think
Mhm.
I'll probably never consider myself a religious person again, I would say. But
Mhm.
I'm realizing for me, I think there are many people who can live happily believing that there is not more to what we're doing here than meets the eye, that there's we're living in an indifferent universe.
Mhm.
That's not me. That
Right.
makes me crash out a little bit. And
Okay.
I've realized that it's okay to choose what you believe, right? In the
Mhm.
sense
Mhm.
that believing in divinity, in purpose, is a choice. Not
Mhm.
believing is a choice. There's no
Mhm.
way to know. So no matter what we believe, we're making a choice. And for me, I am a better person. I'm more loving in my relationships. I'm happier. I'm more connected to the world and things that matter when I lean into a belief that we live in a loving universe, that
Mhm.
that we're connected to each other in a meaningful way, and that our life has a purpose. And so I've let myself lean into that belief, and I'm not as focused anymore on whether it's true. That's less important to me than how does it affect how I show up in my life. So that's been a really special journey, and something that I'm really glad I wrote Make Believe Now. I'm so glad it landed with the imprint and editor that it did.
Mhm.
I think creatively and in terms of the book and other people's experience of it, it was beneficial that way, but also like it has helped me sort myself out a lot.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and your perspective on life and love and what you find to be motivational and impactful is wonderful. I know you've also talked about your mom, and I love moms, so I would love to hear more about your relationship with her and how she helped to nurture your creativity and, just support you in the way that you really needed to truly grow.
Mm, you're gonna make me cry, Nina.
Oh,
I
no,
love
I'm
my
sorry.
mom. No, 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 no. I love my mom, and I love talking about her. She's such a strong person. She's had a really hard life, and
Mm,
we've definitely had really hard chapters in our relationship.
mhm,
My hope with Make Believe is that it reflects an understanding of like the humanness of mothers and kind of the experience of being an adult and realizing why your mom did things that she did. And
mhm,
there's, for example, one poem that's coming to mind is there's a poem in the book called You Used to Ask Why. And it's like
mhm,
you would ask why you had to ask her before you went anywhere with anybody, like even into another room, you had to ask why, all these different things. And
mhm,
then you grow up and you can see for yourself why, that experience of
mhm.
just growing up and understanding that your mom is a person, and
A human.
she's a human being. Yes. And I write a lot about kind of like past versions of ourselves and how they live within us. And I think that that's like something that is important for us to keep in mind with ourselves, but also with the people in our lives. Your mom, to some extent, is the little girl like sitting on the curb waiting for the school bus that she was
Mhm,
40 years ago. She's the teenager that like wants to be seen as cool and desirable, and like all of these people that
mhm,
that she's ever been. She still is. And it's so easy to define people by the rules that they serve in your life. And,
Mhm.
you know, it's very easy to, yeah, just be extremely critical. And lots of my readers have really, really hard relationships with their parents. And I think it's a balance of like validating your own experience and validating that experiences can have been hard and hurtful for you. And at the same
Mhm.
time, like keeping the humanness of whoever's on the other side of the equation in the process. But I love my mom. I hope this book, I hope it reflects that. I hope she hasn't read it yet. I hope she is going to love it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that because we all have to kind of find that balance um, between, our parents, our mothers, our fathers, and who they are as individuals outside of who we dreamed them up to be all of our
Mhm.
lives. And the other thing that kind of comes along with that is the way we see ourselves in them and that mirror effect that happens with all of us. So, I guess my last question would be if love and relationships are mirrors, what do you hope the people in your life see reflected in you?
Do you mean what do you hope they see of themselves or what?
No, like reflected in for example, if love and friendships are our mirrors, like how do you feel, like what would you hope that people see in themselves of you or through you?
I hope that I'm thinking. I think that all we can do is meet each other where we are, right? And so I hope that I can be a space where the people that I love know that they won't be abandoned, where they know
Mhm.
that whatever part of them shows up that day, that it's enough.
Mhm.
I'm really interested right now in like learning to tell the truth. I think we sugarcoat so much of existence in the name
Mhm.
of trying to be seen as good people, in the name of avoiding shame, in the name
Mhm.
of, you know, praying to likability. And
Mhm.
I'm really, really interested right now in kind of getting real. It's something that I'm actively working on myself,
Mhm.
especially for people who like exist on the internet and share.
Oh
It's
my
so
goodness.
it's so hard to be real, and we put on a
Mhm.
show in so many different ways, and it's so easy to do it without knowing you're doing it. And so
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
hope I hope that my goal with anyone I'm in relationship with is to just get to the root of what's true, and it doesn't have to
Ooh.
be pretty, It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be our best selves. There's a poem in the book called Gathering of the Graceless, and it's about like all the little ways we expose ourselves and those embarrassing moments with new people where it's like, oh, they saw me get actually mad. They know what that looks like. Or like, oh, they saw me be jealous. Oh, my vanity came out, and like just how exposed you feel in those moments. And like I think
Mhm.
one of the best things we can offer each other is just like love in the face of those moments where we're exposed, and just to like, it's okay. You can drop the act.
Yes. Truth. Truth and acceptance. I love that so much. That's wonderful. I was laughing because I have so many of those moments. I will literally call my friends after I meet someone and be like, "Oh my gosh, I just said this. Is that really bad or is that okay?" Because
Yes.
I felt like an idiot in that moment.
You have to
But
know the friends to call with those things too, because some friends will be like, I'm so sorry that happened. Like, that is not what I want to hear. I want to hear, like,
no,
I've done that a million times. It's
yeah.
not a big
Or
deal. No one even noticed.
I'm even okay with, okay, that was a little weird, but it wasn't terrible.
Yes.
Like, you can still give me the truth, but
Yes.
I have those moments all the time. It's so funny.
My mom has this story of like walking into school and she got new shoes and thinks everyone is like looking at her new shoes, like in a good way, like the spotlight effect. I always try to remind myself, like, everyone isn't looking at your new shoes. Like, no one is thinking about the embarrassing thing you said, Victoria, but it's hard.
Oh my gosh, that reminds me of my son, actually. He's mentioned before, he gets nervous because he feels like when he walks into the room, everyone is looking at him. And I have to explain to him that it's very unlikely that everyone in the room is looking at you. And that's okay, because it's not you. Typically, if you walk into a room that people are already existing in, it's a natural instinct to maybe look up to see who is entering the room.
Yeah.
But it's not because it's you, Noah. So
No.
he's really sweet. But this has been so enlightening, and you just have a really positive, like, pure, authentic air about you. And so I can see, and I just want to say, I know you've done a lot of work, and through following you on Instagram and watching so many of your videos, you are definitely exuding the things and the intentions that you are hoping to. And that's what I'm gathering from our experience today. I do want to end on one note. We play Do Tell Conversation card game, which we have to send you a copy of. This is I'm going to pop back into screen here. This is my conversation card game. And it's really fun to play with friends and just connect and have meaningful conversations. At the end of every episode, we play. You can pick, since you're not here, you're going to have to just choose a card, and then I'll read you the question and you can answer it.
Sounds great.
The one in the middle, the one on the left, or one on the right. I don't know.
Okay. I will pick the one on the navy one, so it's on my right.
Okay. So this is actually from our Spice Things Up deck.
Oh, no.
It's not that spicy. I handpicked the questions, and
Okay.
so it's not that bad. But okay, here we go. What is the one thing that regularly keeps you up at night?
I'm thinking. This is not a fun or spicy answer. Honestly, I'm deeply afraid of dying, and I think about that at night a lot. That's the truth. I wish it was something spicier. That's my truth.
It's not. It's a truthful, it's an honest answer, and the answers are not meant to be spicy. It's maybe a little bit more of a challenging question, and so I think a lot of people will probably resonate with you on that.
Afraid to die.
Yeah. And you know what? That is a conversation for a whole other episode that I feel like whenever you'd love to come back and talk more about that, I would love to have you.
Oh, I can talk about it for days. We can get into it.
That's so funny. Well, it's been really great. And okay, before you leave, can you tell everyone where it'll be in the description, but let us all know where we can follow you and where we can get your book, which comes out the day this episode airs, which is March 11th, but is available for pre-order now, right?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me. You are lovely. This was such a delight. It was so much fun to get to talk with you, Nina.
Thank you.
My poetry book, Make Believe, is out March 18th and available to pre-order now. I made a short link for if you want to direct yourself to like all the major retailers, Amazon, Target, all those places. You can go to tinyurl.com/makebelievebook, and it should take you to the Penguin Random House site that has all the major retailer options. I'm also partnering with an independent bookstore, Blue Willow, here in Houston, where I live. You can order from there. And if you order before it's out, you'll get a free print. I'm on the internet, on Instagram and TikTok at The Daily Victorian. I share my writing, but also my yoga practice. And that's about it. Those are the places where I am and where you can get make-believe. And if you read it, I hope it means something to you.
Yeah, I can't imagine it wouldn't after our conversation today. It's been so great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really hope you all enjoyed that episode. I will say we have some really exciting guests coming up next week. I will be sitting down with the one and only Tamron Hall. And it's going to be a really fun conversation that you don't want to miss. If you love this episode, leave a comment if you love it, not if you don't love it. Follow us, follow along, Do Tell Relationship Podcast. Listen anywhere you listen to podcasts and share with your friends if you're into it. And you can also follow us on social media at Benet by Nina on Instagram and TikTok. It's Benet X Nina on Instagram and TikTok. You can follow me on social media at Nina Westbrook on Instagram. And I'll do my best to keep you updated with all the amazing guests we have coming up this season on the pod. Can't wait to see you back next week.